The delivery truck's brakes screamed so loud it felt like the whole street jumped. People turned, conversations froze, and for a split second the world narrowed to one tiny body and 10 tons of metal racing toward her. Emma's pink sneakers were halfway off the curb when the truck thundered around the corner, the driver's eyes wide with panic as he yanked the wheel and stomped the brakes. On the sidewalk across the street, 9-year-old Tommy Sullivan didn't think. He moved. 1 second he was hunched over his paper cup, counting the handful of coins he'd begged and collected all morning. The next, he was sprinting. His bare feet slapped against the hot pavement, heart hammering in his throat. The girl's blonde pigtails bounced as she reached for the butterfly floating just out of reach, completely unaware of the danger bearing down on her. "Hey!" Tommy shouted, but his voice vanished under the roar of the engine. He hit her like a tackle in a football game, his skinny shoulder smashing into her chest. The impact sent Emma tumbling backward onto the sidewalk, where she skidded on her hands and started to cry. Tommy didn't get the luxury of landing safe. The truck caught him full on. The bumper smashed into his left side with a sickening crack. Pain exploded through his arm, white-hot and blinding, as his body spun and crashed to the asphalt. The air whooshed out of his lungs. For a second, all he heard was the ringing in his ears and the grinding hiss of rubber against road. Then the world rushed back in. Emma screamed, people shouted, someone cursed. The truck finally lurched to a stop a few yards away, the driver shaking as he stumbled out, his legs barely holding him. Tommy tried to push himself up, but his arm buckled under him and he saw it, bent at an angle it was never meant to bend, bone pressing unnaturally against skin. He screamed then, a raw, tearing sound that ripped through the air. "Emma!" The roar that followed cut through everything. Heavy boots slammed the pavement, and a giant of a man shouldered people aside like they were paper. Leather vest, tattooed arms, graying beard. His face was a storm as he dropped to his knees beside the crying 6-year-old girl. "Are you hurt?" "Emma, look at me," he demanded, his hands scanning for blood, broken bones, anything. She sobbed and shook her head. "Daddy, my hands hurt. But I'm okay. I'm okay." He exhaled so hard it was almost a choke. Relief flooded his eyes, then turned to something darker when Emma hiccuped. "The boy. Daddy. The boy pushed me. He saved me." Only then did he look up. Tommy lay on the asphalt, curled protectively around his shattered arm, gasping for air that wouldn't quite come. His clothes were dirty and 2 sizes too big. His blonde hair was matted and hanging over his eyes. He looked like every adult's worst assumption. Trouble, neglect, nobody. But his eyes. His eyes were bright blue and wide with pain and fear. The biker, Jake Reaper Morrison, felt something twist in his chest. He'd seen broken bones, mangled bikes. Worse. But this was a kid. A stranger's kid. And that kid had just taken the hit meant for his daughter. Reaper pushed to his feet slowly, then walked toward Tommy. The other bikers, at least 20 of them, had formed a loose ring around the scene. Their leather vests flashed patches and colors that made regular people step back on instinct. Engines idled in the background, a low, growling soundtrack. "Don't touch him, man, he's hurt bad," someone murmured. Reaper knelt beside Tommy anyway. Up close, the damage was worse. The boy's arm was already swelling, skin stretched and angry. His breathing was ragged, shallow. He tried to flinch away from the big man's shadow. "Easy, kid," Reaper said, voice low but steady. "You're okay. Stay still." Tommy blinked up at him, trying to focus. Is she okay?" he managed, teeth chattering even in the afternoon heat. Reaper glanced back at Emma, who was clutching another biker's leg, still crying but very much alive. He turned back and locked eyes with Tommy. "She's fine, because of you." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Around them, the crowd buzzed. "Who is he? Anybody know this kid? I've seen him sleeping near the alley behind the market." "Homeless, probably. Poor thing." Tommy heard the words through the haze, "homeless, poor thing," and shame burned hot in his gut. He wanted to disappear, to melt into the pavement, but every breath sent fire racing down his arm. Reaper heard the words too. Homeless, street kid, nobody. He didn't like how that felt. As the sirens drew closer, time seemed to stretch. Reaper's brain flicked through images: Emma's birth, the first time she called him daddy, the promises he'd made to himself to keep her safe no matter what. Now a boy nobody claimed had done what he himself couldn't. He'd been close enough, fast enough, willing enough to throw his body between Emma and death. If you're reading this and you felt that moment when Tommy chose pain over watching a stranger's kid die, don't just scroll past like everyone else on the sidewalk. If you think more people need to see stories of kids this brave, hit subscribe right now so you don't miss what happens to him next. And drop a comment telling where you're watching from so this boy's courage is seen around the world. The ambulance pulled up, tires screeching. Paramedics rushed out with a stretcher. One knelt beside Tommy, eyes going straight to the arm. "Kid, can you hear me?" she asked. Tommy nodded weakly. "We're going to get you some help, okay? Don't move that arm. On 3, we're lifting." She glanced up at Reaper. "You family?" Reaper hesitated. "No, but I'm with him." The paramedic studied the leather, the patches, the aura of danger rolling off him and the men behind him. Most people would have backed away. She just nodded. "Then stay close and keep him calm." They lifted Tommy on 3. The world spun. For a second, he thought he might black out. He caught a glimpse of the street he'd been living on for months, the corner where he slept in the shadows of a closed hardware store, the trash can where he sometimes found half-eaten sandwiches. Oakland had been his whole universe since the day his life fell apart. 6 months on the street had taught Tommy hard rules: stay small, stay quiet, trust no one. His mother had vanished one night with a man whose temper echoed down alleys. The foster system had tried to catch him, but he'd slipped away, scared of being trapped somewhere worse than the sidewalk. He'd learned how to go invisible. Funny thing about saving the wrong person's kid, you stop being invisible. As they wheeled him toward the ambulance, a uniformed officer jogged up, hands on his belt. He saw the leather vests, the skull patches, the unmistakable Hell's Angels rocker, and stiffened, eyes narrowing. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Reaper stood up to his full height. "Accident. Kid pushed my daughter out of the way. Took the hit himself." The cop's gaze flicked from Reaper to Emma, then to Tommy's broken arm. "We'll need statements, and I'm going to need you and your boys to—" Reaper stepped closer, not threatening, but not backing down either. "We're not going anywhere until we know he's taken care of." Tommy watched them through foggy eyes. Cops had never meant safety for him. They meant questions he couldn't answer, forms he couldn't fill, places he didn't want to go. The idea of being trapped in some system again made his chest tighten more than the pain did. He grabbed at the paramedic's sleeve with his good hand. "Please don't let them take me," he whispered. She frowned. "Take you where, honey?" "Anywhere. I'm fine. Just fix my arm. I'll go." The paramedic exchanged a look with Reaper, something unsaid passing between them. This wasn't just a hurt kid. This was a kid with nowhere. Inside the ambulance, the smell of antiseptic wrapped around Tommy, sharp and clean. The doors swung shut, cutting off the rumble of bikes and the murmur of the crowd. One paramedic started an IV, the other applied a temporary splint, both moving quickly and professionally. Reaper climbed into the back without asking permission. The paramedic started to protest, then saw Emma's tear-streaked face through the window, her small hand pressed to the glass, and said nothing. The doors slammed, and the ambulance lurched forward. Tommy stared at Reaper, blinking against the tears he didn't want to shed. "Why are you coming?" he asked, voice small. Reaper settled onto the bench, big hands resting on his knees. "Because you saved my world, kid," he said quietly. "That's not something a man walks away from." Tommy let his eyes close for a moment, exhaustion dragging him under. The pain dulled to a throbbing roar as the siren wailed, pushing traffic aside. For the first time in months, someone was sitting beside him who didn't look like they were about to kick him away from a warm doorway. At the hospital, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as the doors banged open and the stretcher rolled down a corridor. Nurses moved like a current, shouting terms Tommy didn't understand. X-ray, orthopedics, possible compound fracture. They turned a corner and disappeared through double doors, leaving Reaper and one of his bikers staring through a small rectangle of glass. "How bad you think it is?" The other biker, a stocky man with a shaved head and grease under his nails, asked. "Bad," Reaper muttered. "But bones can be fixed." The doctor appeared what felt like hours later, mask hanging loose under his chin, chart in hand. "You're with the boy?" he asked. "Yeah," Reaper said. "How is he?" "Alive, lucky. That truck could have killed him instantly." The doctor paused. "His left arm is badly broken in multiple places. To heal properly, he'll need surgery, plates, pins, follow-up therapy. Without it, he'll probably lose most of the use of that arm. Might heal crooked. Constant pain." "How much?" Reaper's voice was flat. The doctor mentioned a number that made the other biker let out a low whistle. Reaper didn't flinch, but his jaw tightened. "He got parents. Insurance." The doctor shook his head. "No ID, no emergency contacts. The nurses think he's been living on the streets. If that's true, he's got nothing. The hospital can stabilize him, but a surgery like this? Someone has to sign off and someone has to pay." Reaper turned to the small window in the door. Through the glass, he could see Tommy lying in the bed, arm encased in a temporary cast, chest rising and falling. The kid looked even smaller under all that white. The easy choice was to walk away. Let the system do whatever it did. Tell himself the boy was a stranger, an accident, a sad story like 1,000 others. But every time he tried to imagine walking out, he saw Emma in the street again, the truck looming, the tiny body in its path. In that moment, Emma's life had hung on the decision of a homeless 9-year-old who had nothing and still chose to give everything. If you've ever watched someone risk it all for somebody they didn't even know, you know that kind of courage doesn't come around often. If you think Tommy deserves more than to be forgotten in a hospital bed, subscribe right now so you don't miss how far one decision can ripple. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from so his story travels farther than any of those bikes ever could. Reaper took out his phone. "Who are you calling?" the other biker asked. "Everybody," Reaper said. His thumb hovered for a second. Then he hit the number that rang straight into the heart of his world. When the line picked up, his voice was low and certain. "Church meeting. Tonight. Every chapter within 200 miles. Non-negotiable." He ended the call and slid the phone back into his pocket, eyes never leaving the boy on the bed. The other biker frowned. "You sure about this, Reaper? Pulling in that many brothers? Over a kid we don't even know?" Reaper's fingers curled into fists. "We know enough. He's the reason my daughter's going home tonight instead of a coffin." He nodded toward the room. Kid doesn't know it yet, but his life just changed. Outside, in the hospital parking lot, the rumble of approaching engines started faint and low, then grew, like a storm rolling in. 1 bike, 5, 20, more. People drifted to the windows, eyes widening as rows of Hell's Angels began to line up, chrome and leather glinting under the streetlights. By the time the sun dipped behind the buildings, the lot was filling fast. Reaper watched shadows of bikes crawl up the walls and knew this was only the beginning. Because when 200 Hell's Angels decide to pay a debt, the world doesn't stay the same. And for a broken-armed homeless boy in a hospital bed, the impossible was about to show up in force. By the time the sun dipped, the hospital parking lot rumbled like a caged thunderstorm. Rows of motorcycles lined every open space, chrome gleaming under the streetlights, engines idling low as more riders poured in from every direction. Men in leather vests stepped off their bikes, their patches all bearing the same name, the same skull and wings emblem. This was not an accident anymore. It was an event. Inside, a nurse peered through the blinds and swallowed. "There must be 100 of them," she whispered. "More," another nurse replied. "They just keep coming." Upstairs, Reaper stood at the window of Tommy's room, watching the tide of bikes form below. The boy lay on the bed behind him, sedated after a second round of pain meds, his left arm immobilized in a heavy temporary cast. The machines around him beeped steadily, a rhythm that had begun to drill itself into Reaper's skull. He turned away from the glass and studied the kid. Alone. No flowers, no visitors, no cheap balloon tied to the bed. Just a plastic cup of water and a hospital blanket pulled up to his chest. Reaper had seen soldiers with less damage than this kid, and he'd seen enough lost causes to know when the world had decided someone didn't count. Not this time. The door creaked open and Wrench stepped in, helmet tucked under his arm, vest dusty from the ride. "They're here," he said. "Every chapter within 200 miles sent someone. Some sent 5. Reaper nodded once. "We got a room?" "Hospital conference room on the 1st floor. They tried to say no." Wrench smirked. "Changed their minds when they saw the parking lot." Reaper cast one last look at Tommy. "Stay with him when I'm done. Nobody goes near this kid without going through us first." Wrench's expression hardened. "You got it." As Reaper walked down the hallway, the air seemed to tighten. Nurses stepped aside. Orderlies pretended not to stare, but failed. Even the cops stationed near the ER doors shifted uneasily as dozens of leather-clad men began to filter in through the automatic doors, their presence turning the sterile hospital into foreign territory. If you're still here following Tommy's story, don't just watch like the people staring from the corners of this hospital. Like and subscribe so you stay with this kid when others walk away. The conference room was too small for the number of men who packed into it. The overhead lights hummed, reflecting off patches, rings, and hardened faces. Some leaned against the walls, others sat at the long table, arms folded. A few had helmets at their feet, ready to ride at a word. Reaper took his place at the head of the room. Conversations died quickly. The low murmur of engines outside felt like a heartbeat. "Brothers," he began, voice carrying without effort. "You all know I don't call church like this unless it matters." A murmur of assent rolled through the room. "This afternoon, my daughter Emma almost died. Truck came around a corner too fast. She stepped into the street." He paused, jaw tight for a heartbeat. "I was too far away. Too slow." No one moved. No one spoke. Reaper continued. "The only reason she's alive is a kid. A nobody. 9 years old. Homeless. That boy threw himself in front of that truck and took the hit she was supposed to take." A few curses slipped out. Someone shook his head. Another muttered, "9?" "His arm's shattered," Reaper said. "Doctor says without surgery, plates, therapy, he'll never use it right again. But he's got no family here, no ID, no insurance. As far as the system's concerned, he's a problem they can patch and forget." He let the words hang in the air. One of the older bikers, Axel, scratched at his gray beard. "You want us to cover the hospital bill?" he asked. "We've done that kind of thing before." Reaper shook his head. "It's bigger than that. This isn't just a bill. This is a debt." He tapped his chest. "My debt. Our debt." That boy didn't hesitate. He didn't measure risk. He saw a kid in danger and he moved. How many of us can say we'd have done more than yell? The room went silent in a deeper way. There were men here who'd walked into fights, fires, and wars. But a homeless boy willingly stepping into a truck's path for a stranger's child hit different. "We patch over upstanding men," Reaper went on. "We call ourselves a brotherhood. That can't just be a word when it's easy. This kid is 9. The world wrote him off. I'm not letting that be the end of his story, not when my daughter's breathing because of him." Axel studied him for a moment, then pushed up from his chair. "What are you asking for exactly?" Reaper looked around the room, meeting eyes that had seen everything. "I'm asking for Operation Tommy," he said. "We pay for his surgery, all of it. We make sure he's got a place to live when he walks out of here. We find out who he is, what happened to him, and if there's anyone out there who's supposed to give a damn and didn't." A ripple went through the crowd. Some nodded immediately. Others frowned, calculating what it meant. Money, time, attention, risk. "If we're going to do this, it has to be more than throwing cash at a problem," Reaper said. "We don't half fix a bike and call it roadworthy. Same for this kid. We see it through." A younger biker with a scar across his eyebrow lifted his chin. "You realize, boss, once we take him on, he's ours. That means anyone who thinks they can push him around is pushing us." Reaper's mouth curved in a grim smile. "Exactly." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Axel raised his hand, not in question, but like he was swearing something. "All in," he said. For the kid. One by one, others echoed it. All in. All in. All in. If watching a room full of men with violent reputations vote to protect a broken kid hit you in the gut, that feeling matters. Like and subscribe so more people see what real loyalty looks like. When the chorus faded, Reaper nodded once. Good. We start tonight. He pointed toward Wrench, who stood near the back. You and Cage start digging. Hospitals, shelters, missing kids reports. I want to know where this boy came from and who failed him. Wrench smirked. Already on it. Ran his face by a couple of downtown regulars on the way in. They call him Tommy. Nobody knows a last name. Then we find one. Reaper turned to another biker. Ghost, you coordinate with the treasurers from every chapter here. We pool funds, no arguments. The hospital gets their money before sunrise. Ghost nodded, already pulling out his phone. The logistics spun into motion quickly. These men knew how to organize. They'd pulled off cross-state runs, evacuations under threat, emergency rides in the middle of the night. Doing it for a 9-year-old didn't make it harder. It made it urgent. When the meeting adjourned, the riders filed out in small clusters, splitting off to make calls, send messages, form plans. The hospital staff watched nervously as they moved through the corridors, silent, purposeful, frightening in number and focus. Back upstairs, Tommy's room had gained a new guardian. Wrench sat in the visitor's chair with his boots planted wide, arms crossed over his chest, eyes flicking from the door to the boy and back again. The TV hung silent on the wall, screen black. Tommy stirred, mumbling, his face tightening as a twinge of pain slipped past the medication. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then slowly sharpening. The harsh overhead light made everything too bright. Hey, kid, Wrench said, voice softer than his appearance suggested. Welcome back. Tommy blinked at him. The man looked like trouble. Tattoos, stubble, a nose that had definitely been broken more than once. Where's the big guy? Tommy croaked. Reaper. He's handling some things. You got a whole lot of uncles now, looks like. Tommy frowned. Uncles? Guys who've decided you're not nobody. Tommy shifted and winced when his arm protested. They mad at me? He asked. For the truck? For her? Wrench shook his head. Kid, they're here because of what you did. You saved Reaper's little girl. That makes you important. Tommy swallowed. The word felt foreign. Important. No one had called him that in a long time, maybe ever. The door opened and a hospital social worker stepped in, clipboard in hand, expression professional but tired. She glanced at Wrench, then at Tommy. Hi, Tommy, she said. My name is Karen. I'm here to talk to you about what happens next. Wrench's eyes narrowed. He's still doped up. Maybe this can wait. Karen offered a tight smile. Medical decisions can't wait. Neither can placement. We need to figure out where he goes after he's discharged. There's no record of guardians, and if he's been living on the street... Tommy tensed. I don't want to go back, he blurted. To some house, to strangers. We just want to make sure you're safe, Karen said. The system lost him once already, Wrench cut in. Right? That's how he ended up out there. Karen hesitated. We don't have all the details yet, but if his mother is missing and there's no listed family... Wrench stood up slowly, the room feeling smaller all at once. Then maybe you let the people who showed up for him today have a say in that conversation. Karen's professional calm flickered. With all due respect, you are not registered foster guardians. The state wasn't there when that truck came, Wrench snapped. The state wasn't sleeping on concrete. The state isn't downstairs filling your parking lot because one kid mattered that much. Tommy's heart pounded. Adults arguing about him never went well. It meant decisions made in rooms he wasn't allowed into. It meant being moved like a package, not a person. If you've ever felt like decisions were being made about your life without your voice in the room, you know exactly how small Tommy feels in this moment. Like and subscribe so his voice doesn't get drowned out in the noise. Karen opened her mouth to reply, but the door swung open again and Reaper stepped inside. The argument died instantly. He took in the scene in a heartbeat. Tommy, pale and tense, Wrench bristling, Karen clutching her clipboard like a shield. "Problem?" Reaper asked. Karen cleared her throat. "We're discussing post-surgery placement and legal guardianship. This boy cannot just leave with the only people who've shown up for him today," Reaper finished. "We're not talking about walking him out tonight. We're talking about making sure he gets the surgery he needs." Karen seized on that. And who exactly is authorizing that surgery? Someone has to sign as responsible party. Reaper stepped closer to the bed, his presence filling the room. "Put it in my name," he said. "Whatever papers you need, I'll sign." Karen stared at him. "You understand the financial responsibility you're assuming?" "Already taken care of," Reaper said. "You'll have payment before you roll him into that operating room." "You can't just..." "You can either spend the next 24 hours arguing with me about what I can't do," Reaper said evenly, "or you can book the OR and fix the arm of the kid who saved my daughter's life." Karen faltered, eyes darting between the men and the boy. The machine at Tommy's bedside beeped a little faster, mirroring his anxiety. "Let me speak with administration," she said finally. "If you're willing to put everything in writing and payment is guaranteed." "It is," Reaper said. She nodded, clearly unconvinced this would be as simple as he made it sound, and slipped out. When the door shut, Reaper turned to Tommy. The hard edge in his face softened. "How you doing, kid?" Tommy licked his lips. You're really gonna pay for all this?" His voice trembled. "You don't even know me." Reaper pulled the visitor's chair closer and sat, forearms resting on his knees. "I know enough," he said. "I know you didn't hesitate when you saw my little girl in danger. I know you stepped up when you could have run." Tommy looked down at his cast. "I was scared," he whispered. "Being scared and moving anyway," Reaper said. "That's the bravest thing there is." Tommy's eyes burned. "What if they send me away?" he asked. "To some place I don't want to go?" Reaper's gaze didn't waver. "Then they're going to have a lot of men with motorcycles and lawyers asking loud questions," he said. "You're not invisible anymore, Tommy." The kid let out a shaky breath, somewhere between a laugh and a sob. No one had ever said that like it was a good thing. Down in the parking lot, Ghost moved between groups of bikers, collecting pledges on his phone. Cash, transfers, favors. The numbers climbed quickly, faster than anyone outside that circle would have guessed. One chapter covered the surgeon. Another covered physical therapy. Someone's cousin worked in medical billing and quietly agreed to adjust a few things. Within hours, what had seemed impossible for one homeless boy was a solved problem for 200 determined outlaws. Upstairs, a nurse slipped into Tommy's chart a new page. Consent for surgery, signed and stamped. She glanced at the boy sleeping in the dim light, his face relaxed for the first time since he'd arrived. "Kid doesn't know how lucky he is," she muttered under her breath. She wasn't entirely right. Luck hadn't put those bikes in the lot. A choice had. One kid's choice to move, one man's choice to answer that courage with action. And as the night deepened and the hospital settled into its strange, humming quiet, an entire brotherhood stood ready to do what nobody expected them to do next. Morning arrived with the sound of folders slapping hard against a table. Tommy stirred in his hospital bed, vision still foggy from medication, as voices rumbled just outside his door. Through the small window in the frame, he could see Wrench and another biker arguing in hushed, urgent tones with someone holding papers. Inside the conference room downstairs, Reaper stood with his arms crossed, staring at a pile of documents Wrench had just dropped in front of him. Birth certificates, missing persons reports, security camera stills from convenience stores and shelters, and photographs, dozens of them, all leading to one conclusion. "Her name is Lisa Sullivan," Wrench said, tapping one of the photos. "Tommy's mother. Disappeared 6 months ago with a boyfriend named Marcus Tully. Known abuser, drug charges, multiple warrants." Reaper studied the image. A thin woman with tired eyes and blonde hair pulled back tight. She looked worn down, like someone who'd been running from something for years. "Where is she now?" Reaper asked. Wrench hesitated, then slid another photo across the table. It showed a different clubhouse, different colors, different patches. The skull logo was unmistakable. "Reno," Wrench said quietly. "She's with the Mongols." The room went dead silent. Every man present understood what that meant. The Mongols weren't allies. They weren't even neutral. They were rivals. And crossing into their territory uninvited could ignite something none of them wanted. Cage, a younger rider with sharp eyes and a scar running through his left eyebrow, leaned forward. "Marcus Tully's a Mongol prospect. Been trying to patch in for 2 years. Word is he keeps Lisa around like a pet. Won't let her leave." Reaper's jaw clenched. "So, she's not missing. She's trapped." "Looks that way," Wrench said. "Question is, what do we do about it?" The silence stretched. Reaper turned toward the window, staring out at the rows of bikes still parked in the lot. 200 men had shown up for a kid they didn't know. Now he was asking them to ride into enemy territory for a woman they'd never met. But the image of Tommy's face kept flickering in his mind. The fear, the pain, the way the boy had asked if they were mad at him. A kid shouldn't carry that kind of weight. And no kid should lose his mother to a coward who kept her prisoner. "We go get her," Reaper said. Cage blinked. "Boss, you're talking about riding into Mongol country. That's a war waiting to happen." "Not if we do it right," Reaper replied. He turned back to the table, eyes hard. "We're not going there to start a fight. We're going there to finish one. That woman didn't abandon her kid. She was forced out. And the man who did it is using Mongol colors to hide behind." Axel, the grizzled older biker who'd been silent until now, scratched his beard. "You think their president will see it that way?" "He's got kids," Reaper said. "I checked. 2 daughters. If he's got any kind of code, he'll understand what we're there for." Wrench shook his head slowly, And if he doesn't? Reaper's expression didn't waver. Then we make sure he does. Within the hour, 50 Hell's Angels were geared up and rolling out in formation. Not the full 200, that would have been an invasion. 50 was a statement. Enough to show strength. Enough to demand respect. Not enough to force a bloodbath unless the Mongols wanted one. The ride to Reno took hours. The desert stretched wide and empty on either side of the highway, heat shimmering off the asphalt. Helmets gleamed under the sun, engines roared in perfect synchronization, and the world seemed to hold its breath as the convoy tore through Nevada like a storm with purpose. Back at the hospital, Tommy sat upright in bed, his surgery scheduled for the following morning. A nurse had brought him breakfast, eggs, toast, juice, but he hadn't touched it. His stomach twisted with nerves he didn't fully understand. A different biker, one called Ghost, sat in the corner reading a magazine. He glanced up when Tommy shifted. "You good, kid?" Tommy nodded, but his voice betrayed him. "Where did everyone go?" Ghost set the magazine down. "Handling some business. They'll be back." "What kind of business?" Ghost studied him for a moment, then chose his words carefully. "The kind that makes sure you're not alone anymore." Tommy frowned, but before he could ask more, Ghost's phone buzzed. He checked the screen, then stood. "I'll be right outside the door. You need anything, you holler." Tommy watched him leave, anxiety creeping higher. Adults always said things like that right before something bad happened. In Reno, the convoy slowed as they approached the Mongols' clubhouse. It sat on the edge of an industrial district, a low building with barred windows and bikes parked in rows out front. The Mongol sentries saw them coming a mile away. By the time Reaper's bike rolled to a stop, at least 30 Mongols had gathered outside, arms crossed, faces hard. Their president, a barrel-chested man named Rourke with a shaved head and tattoos crawling up his neck, stepped forward. "You're a long way from Oakland, Reaper," Rourke said, voice rough as gravel. Reaper pulled off his helmet and met his eyes. "Didn't come for trouble. Came for a woman." Rourke's expression didn't shift. "That's so." "Lisa Sullivan," Reaper said. "She's here with one of your prospects, Marcus Tully." A flicker of recognition crossed Rourke's face, but he didn't move. "And what's she to you?" "Her son saved my daughter's life 2 days ago," Reaper said. "Threw himself in front of a truck so she wouldn't get hit. Kid's 9 years old. Been living on the streets for 6 months because his mother disappeared." He paused. "Turns out she didn't disappear. She was taken." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "Careful what you're accusing." "I'm not accusing your club," Reaper said. "I'm accusing Marcus Tully. He's keeping her here against her will. That's not brotherhood, that's cowardice." The tension in the air thickened. The Mongols shifted, hands drifting closer to belts, pockets, places where weapons hid. The Hell's Angels didn't move, but 50 pairs of eyes tracked every motion. If you think one wrong word here could change everything, you're right. Like and subscribe so you see whether this ends in blood or something better. Rourke stared at Reaper for a long, dangerous moment. Then he turned his head slightly. "Bring Tully out here, and the woman." A younger Mongol hesitated, then disappeared inside. The wait felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than 2 minutes. When the door opened again, Marcus Tully stepped out first, a wiry man with greasy hair and nervous energy. Behind him, barely visible, was Lisa Sullivan. She looked worse than her photograph. Thinner, bruised under one eye. Her hands shook as she stood behind Marcus, eyes darting between the two groups of bikers like a cornered animal. Marcus tried to swagger. "What's this about?" he asked, but his voice cracked. Rourke didn't look at him. He looked at Lisa. "You here by choice?" Lisa's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her eyes flicked to Marcus, and the fear there said everything. "She's fine," Marcus said quickly. "She's with me. This is none of their—" "I asked her," Rourke snapped. "Not you." Lisa's lips trembled. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. I want to leave." Marcus grabbed her arm. "You don't mean that, you're—" Reaper moved. Not fast, not aggressive, but deliberate. He stepped forward, and the air shifted. "Take your hand off her," he said quietly. Marcus didn't let go. "She's mine. You don't get to just—" Rourke raised one hand, and two Mongols moved in, grabbing Marcus by the shoulders and yanking him backward. He stumbled, shouting protests, but no one listened. Rourke looked at Lisa again. "You got somewhere to go?" Lisa shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. I don't know. My son, Tommy, I don't even know if he's alive," Reaper said, voice softening. "And he's looking for you." Lisa's knees buckled. One of the Mongols caught her before she hit the ground. She sobbed into her hands, the kind of crying that comes from months of holding everything in. Rourke turned to Reaper. "You came here for her. You take her. But Tully stays. He's got debts to pay now." Reaper nodded once. "Fair enough." Marcus tried to lunge forward, but the Mongols held him fast. "You can't do this!" he screamed. "She's nothing without me! She's—" Rourke's fist connected with Marcus's jaw, and the man crumpled. The Mongol president shook out his hand and looked back at Reaper. "We're done here." Reaper extended his hand. After a beat, Rourke shook it. The ride back was quieter. Lisa sat behind Axel, arms wrapped tight around his waist, face buried against his back. She didn't speak, didn't ask questions, just held on like she was afraid if she let go, she'd fall into a void. When they rolled back into Oakland as the sun dipped low, the hospital parking lot still buzzed with bikes. News of the Reno run had spread fast, and the brothers who'd stayed behind were waiting to see if it had gone sideways. Reaper killed his engine and helped Lisa off the bike. She stood on shaking legs, eyes red and swollen. "Where is he?" she whispered. "Where's Tommy?" Reaper gestured toward the hospital entrance. "Fourth floor, room 412. Lisa took a step, then stopped. What if he hates me?" Her voice cracked. "I left him. He was just a baby, and He's been asking about you," Reaper said gently. "Every kid wants their mother. If you're wondering whether a mother who left her son can ever be forgiven, you're about to find out. Like and subscribe so you don't miss what happens when they see each other again." They walked through the automatic doors together, Lisa flanked by Reaper and Wrench. Nurses stared. Security hesitated but didn't move. By now, the hospital staff had learned that when the Hells Angels showed up, they had reasons. At the elevator, Lisa's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Wrench pressed the button for the fourth floor. The doors slid shut, and the silence inside was deafening. When they reached room 412, Reaper knocked once, then pushed the door open. Tommy sat propped up in bed, flipping through a comic book someone had brought him. He looked up, expecting to see Ghost or one of the other bikers. Instead, he saw her, his mother. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Tommy's face went white. The comic book slipped from his hands and hit the floor. Then he screamed, "Get her away from me!" Lisa flinched like she'd been struck. Reaper stepped between them instinctively, hands up. "Tommy, wait! No!" Tommy's voice cracked, tears streaming down his face. He tried to scramble backward in the bed, his casted arm making it impossible. "She left me. She just left me." Lisa's sobs broke free, raw and desperate. "Tommy, I'm so sorry. You left me on the street!" Tommy shouted, his voice rising to a wail. "You said you'd come back and you didn't. I waited and you never came." Reaper's chest tightened. He looked at Lisa, whose face had crumpled completely, then back at Tommy, whose pain was too big for his small body to hold. "Kid," Reaper said quietly, "let her explain." "I don't want to hear it," Tommy choked out. "I don't want her here." Lisa fell to her knees just inside the doorway, hands pressed to her face. "I thought I was protecting you," she sobbed. "He said he'd kill you if I didn't leave. He said—" Tommy froze. His breath hitched. "What?" Lisa looked up, mascara streaked down her cheeks, eyes bloodshot. "Marcus said if I didn't leave you behind, he'd hurt you. He said terrible things, and I believed him. I thought if I left, you'd be safe. I thought someone would find you and take care of you, and you'd be better off without me." Tommy stared at her, chest heaving. You thought leaving me alone was keeping me safe?" "I know it was wrong," Lisa whispered. "I know. But I was so scared, Tommy. I was so scared, and I didn't know what else to do." The room hung suspended in that moment. Every word a landmine, every breath fragile. Reaper stepped back, letting them have the space. Wrench stood by the door, silent as stone. Tommy's hands curled into fists. "I thought you didn't want me anymore," he said, voice breaking. "I thought I did something wrong." "No," Lisa said, crawling closer. "No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. You're perfect. You're brave and perfect, and I should have fought harder. I should have—" Her words dissolved into sobs. Tommy's face twisted, caught between anger and grief, between the child who needed his mother and the boy who'd learned to survive without her. Finally, he whispered, "I missed you." Lisa's breath caught. "I missed you too, every single day." Slowly, painfully, Tommy reached out his good hand. Lisa took it, and they both broke. Lisa wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist, still kneeling beside the bed. "I should have taken you and run," she whispered. "I thought leaving you would keep you alive. I was wrong, Tommy. I was wrong about everything." He stared at her, cheeks blotchy from crying, chest still heaving. "You left me," he said, but the words had less venom now, more exhaustion. "I waited. So long." "I know," she said, "and I will spend the rest of my life making that up to you." Behind them, Reaper leaned against the wall, arms folded, saying nothing. This wasn't a problem he could fix with a wrench or a vote. It was surgery of a different kind, the steady, slow cutting away of lies, making room for truth to heal. Tommy looked down at his cast, then back at his mother. "Are you staying?" he asked finally. "For real?" Lisa nodded so hard it made her hair fall into her face. If you'll let me. If you tell me to walk away, I will. But if you give me one more chance, I'm not wasting it. Silence stretched, fragile and heavy. Okay, Tommy whispered. One more. She broke again, but this time she cried into his blanket instead of her hands, her shoulders shaking with the kind of relief that hurts. Reaper cleared his throat softly. All right, he said. We've got surgery in the morning. He needs rest. You both do. Tomorrow we start over. The next day, when they wheeled Tommy toward the operating room, he wasn't alone. Lisa walked on one side of the gurney, Reaper on the other. A nurse glanced at the chart, then at them. Family? She asked. Lisa opened her mouth, then hesitated. Yeah, Reaper answered. Family. Tommy smiled behind the oxygen mask. It was a word he hadn't been able to trust for a long time. Now it didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a promise. The surgery was long. Lisa wore a path into the waiting room floor. Reaper paced on the other side of the hall, pausing only when a nurse walked by who might know something. Hours crawled. When the surgeon finally appeared, removing his cap, they both froze. It went well, he said. We repaired the fractures, placed the hardware, and everything lined up clean. He's young, and that's on his side. With rehab, he should get full function back. Lisa covered her face, a sob of pure relief ripping from her chest. Reaper let his head drop for a second, exhaling like he'd been punched. Can we see him? Reaper asked. In recovery, one at a time at first, the doctor replied. He'll be groggy, but he made it through just fine. If you've ever waited outside a door like that, hoping it opens with good news, you know exactly why this moment matters more than any chase or fight you've ever watched. Like and subscribe so you don't miss where Tommy's courage takes him next. Tommy woke to the beep of monitors and the soft hum of machines. The ache in his arm was deep and dull, wrapped tight in a fresh cast that ran from wrist to bicep. His mouth was dry. Hey, tough guy. He turned his head. Lisa sat beside the bed, hair pulled back, eyes still puffy but bright. You did it, she said. You scared half a hospital and a couple hundred bikers, but you did it. Did they fix it? Tommy croaked. The doctor said you're going to be okay, she said. You'll have to work at it, but yeah, they fixed it. He blinked slowly. Where's Reaper? Right here, Reaper answered, pushing the curtain aside. He stepped in with a half smirk. You stayed knocked out much longer, and Axel was about to start telling people he could beat you in an arm wrestle. Tommy snorted, then winced. He probably can. For now, Reaper said. But I've seen how stubborn you are. I'm not betting against you. Recovery wasn't instant. It never is. The days blurred into a rhythm of nurses, medicine cups, and the slow process of learning how to move again without flinching. Physical therapy hurt in a way Tommy didn't have words for. Every stretch felt like someone pressing on the memory of the truck. He wanted to quit more than once. Every time, someone was there. Lisa sat through sessions, cheering when he managed another degree of movement. Axel showed up on days the pain was worst, telling stories about crashes he'd walked away from. The pins in his own leg, he joked, were factory upgrades. Reaper kept his promises, appearing like clockwork, bringing bad coffee for himself and smuggled chocolate milk for Tommy. You're not doing this alone, he'd say. Not anymore. When the day came for discharge, the nurses gathered at the doorway, pretending they just happened to be there. One of them slipped Tommy a small notebook. "Write what you do with that arm," she said. "It's earned some good stories." They wheeled him out past a row of bikers who straightened when they saw him, some nodding, some raising 2 fingers in a quiet salute. At the curb, Emma waited with a card clutched in both hands. She stepped forward shyly. "This is for you," she said. On the front, in uneven crayon lines, she'd drawn herself holding Tommy's good hand, with a big truck crossed out behind them and 2 motorcycles on either side. Above it, all caps, "My hero." Tommy traced the letters like they were carved stone. "Thanks," he said softly. "You okay? No bad dreams?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "But when I do, I remember you pushed me. Then it gets better." He nodded. "Okay. Just keep looking both ways, all right?" She laughed, the sound cutting through the hospital noise like sunlight. Outside the sliding doors, Reaper didn't lead Tommy back to the streets he knew. He led him to a beat-up sedan parked beside the rows of bikes. "Thought you rode," Tommy said, confused. "I do," Reaper replied. "But your mom doesn't ride, and right now, you two go together." Lisa squeezed Tommy's shoulder. "We're going home," she said. Home turned out to be a small apartment on the west side. The paint was chipped in places, and the carpet had seen better days, but the locks worked, the water ran hot, and the second bedroom had a real bed waiting for him. Someone had set a comic book on the pillow, along with a folded t-shirt with a tiny stitched logo, crossed wrenches, and a wing. "Your size," Lisa said. "Axel's wife guessed." Tommy set Emma's card on the nightstand like a framed photograph, then sat on the bed. The mattress dipped under his weight and stayed, not like the cold concrete that never gave anything back. For the first time in a long time, he closed his eyes in a room where the sounds outside the window, cars, voices, a dog barking, felt like background, not a threat. Days turned into weeks. Lisa started working at a diner run by Axel's sister, learning how to balance trays and handle rude customers without flinching. Tips weren't much at first, but they were honest. Every dollar she brought home felt like 1 more inch between her and Marcus's shadow. Tommy started school. On his first day back, Reaper parked his bike at the curb and walked him to the gate. Parents and teachers stole looks they thought he didn't notice. A man like that walking a kid into class didn't fit the picture they had in their heads. Tommy did, though. Clean jeans, backpack not held together with tape, arm in a lighter brace now, not a clunky cast. Fear still lived in his chest, but it didn't run the place anymore. "You need me to walk you all the way in?" Reaper asked. Tommy shook his head, then hesitated. "Will you be here after?" Reaper nodded. "You go learn something. I'll be where you left me." By the end of that week, the stares had shifted. People still noticed, but they noticed something else too. The way Tommy's shoulders sat a little higher each day, the way he laughed with kids at lunch, the way the man at the gate never missed pickup. The brotherhood didn't disappear when the crisis ended. It changed shape. Some days, it looked like Axel helping Tommy with homework he pretended to hate but secretly loved. Other days, it was Ghost showing up with a box of groceries that just happened to be extra. On Saturdays, Tommy swept the garage floor, watched hands rebuild engines, and slowly learned what every tool did. "Think you'll ever want a bike?" Axel asked one afternoon, wiping grease from his fingers. Tommy glanced at his scar, flexing his once broken hand. "Maybe," he said, "but if I do, I'm gonna know exactly how it works before I ride it." "That's the smartest thing I've heard all week," Axel replied. 6 months after the surgery, the doctor held up Tommy's latest scan. "Everything looks good," he said. "You keep doing those exercises, you won't even notice most days that it was ever broken." Tommy smiled shyly. "I already kind of forget sometimes," he said, "until it aches when it rains." "That's just your built-in weather report," the doctor joked. "Use it wisely." Outside the hospital, this time as a visitor, not a resident, Tommy found Reaper leaning on his bike, as usual. "Well," Reaper asked. "He says I'm going to be annoying people with this arm for a long time," Tommy said. Reaper clapped a hand lightly on his shoulder. "That's what we were aiming for." They rode to the clubhouse together that afternoon. It wasn't Tommy's first time there anymore, but this time felt different. Familiar. Like walking into a relative's house where you knew which step creaked and which cabinet had the good snacks. Inside, someone had rigged up a small banner from shop rags and marker, "Welcome back, Bionic Boy." Tommy groaned, but he was grinning. "Really?" "You got metal in you now," Wrench said. "You're practically half machine. Own it." Later that day, as the sun slid down and the engines cooled, Tommy sat on the clubhouse steps watching the sky turn orange. Lisa arrived from her shift, apron still on, hair escaping its tie. Emma chased a stray dog in the lot, laughing. Men who'd once been whispers and rumors were now just there. Predictable, loud, human. Reaper sat beside Tommy, holding 2 bottles of soda. He passed one over. "You know," Reaper said, "when that truck came around the corner, you had about 1,000 things you could have done. Run, freeze, look away. You didn't do any of those." Tommy stared at the soda cap, twisting it. "I didn't feel like I had a choice," he said. "I just moved." "That's what people say when they make the best choice they had and don't want credit for it," Reaper replied. "But choices like that? They change more than just a moment. Look around you." Tommy did. At his mother, smiling, tired but real. At Emma, safe and bright. At the bikes, at the men, at the garage where he now knew where the tools were kept. "All this," Reaper said quietly, "because one kid refused to let something awful happen in front of him." Tommy took a sip of soda. It wasn't the kind of thing you argue with, not because you think it's wrong, but because you don't quite know what to do with the weight of it. "Do you ever regret anything?" Tommy asked after a while. "Plenty," Reaper said. "But not answering what you did with something of my own. You jumped for Emma. We jumped for you. Seems fair." The sky deepened to purple. One by one, bikes started up, taillights blinking in the dusk. Tommy knew they'd be back. The Brotherhood had a way of circling. He didn't know about the black SUV that sometimes parked a street away from the school now and then, engine idling. A man watching and waiting with questions no one had asked yet. That was a story for another time. What he did know was this: he wasn't invisible. He wasn't alone. He wasn't just the homeless boy who broke his arm anymore. He was Tommy Sullivan, the kid who saved a life and got his own rebuilt in the process. A life with a mother who showed up, a ragtag army of bikers who'd done the impossible for him, and a future that, for the first time, felt like something he could ride toward instead of run from.